Hello and welcome to the Andrew Ferris Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the show. Today I have a great show for you with my friend Nate Lagos, who is the head of marketing at Original Grain. And Nate is a great marketer and a great digital marketing and e-commerce thinker across the board. But this episode was inspired by a brilliant sort of summary of how much they are crushing and having success tweet that Nate put out. And that tweet is in the show notes, so you may want to go reference that because it is a monster of a tweet. It is long, and it has 10 reasons, 10 learnings as to why Original Grain, Nate's brand, has seen a huge amount of success in the last year or so that he summarized and put into practice. And absolutely love this. I immediately reached out to Nate, DM'd him, and said, let's please record a podcast episode about these learnings. It is so many things that I feel like I'm harping on all the time, except they're expressed in relationship to a very specific brand, specific incident, specific case, where a lot of these things that I think are so hard to actually do, they're easy to believe, but they're hard to actually do, seem to have come alive in Nate's brand. And so we're just going to talk through maybe point by point, go through what's going on. You're going to like this episode a lot. It's going to be incredibly practical and helpful for you if you are also trying to grow your e-commerce business with all the usual digital advertising tools and strategies that we're talking about on this show. So no reason to delay it any further. Let's jump in with Nate Lagos from Original Grain. Nate, what's happening, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for having me.
It is my great pleasure. Thanks so much for just an absolute banger of a tweet that got the conversation going. It looks like the engagement numbers are pretty strong on it too. I feel like it did pretty well.
Yeah, well, I think probably my most liked and reached tweet of all time, and now we've got a podcast coming out about it, so it's great, man. I'm pumped.
Good. Get that follower count, get all the engagement, and then start monetizing from Elon. Just like watch the dollars roll in.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
Awesome. Okay, give people a little bit of context first, Nate. So let's talk your position at Original Grain. What is Original Grain? How long you've been there? Just give people a little bit of context for what they're listening to here.
Yeah, so I'm the head of marketing at Original Grain Watch Company. We specialize in making watches out of unique and reclaimed materials like whiskey barrels, tone wood from guitars, military ammo crates. We like to say that our watches don't just tell time, but they tell stories because every piece is truly a unique and reclaimed piece of history. The brand's been around for about a decade. I got hired on by the founders almost 2 years ago. And they were facing kind of a plateau in their business, grown fast and then scaled back a little bit in favor of profitability and efficiency. So my job was to come in and start stacking some profitable growth for us. Prior to OG, I was the chief marketing officer of Dugout Mugs. I was the head of marketing for Anchor Bat Company. So if anyone needs to sell anything made out of wood, I'm kind of the guy for that, apparently. But yeah, it's been a great journey, and I'm happy to look back now on my time at OG and be able to see some of that great growth come to fruition.
Does Original Grain make watches out of baseball bats too?
You're stealing our product roadmap for 24, yeah. But we're getting there.
It seems like a pretty clear one, mostly as much as anything else because of your background, as much as the tool itself. Can I give you another one for free that you should use? This was an old idea I had when I was at FC Goods, which was to take like vintage radios, like old big wood vintage radios. I don't know if anybody would care about that, but I think there's kind of a cool story there around old radios. But you see a lot of these old wood radios, and some of them are like gigantic, and so you could probably get pretty far out of one piece. So yeah, that's really cool. You played high level baseball too, right?
Yeah, I played at North Greenville University. It's a small Division II here in South Carolina, and then played summer ball in Alaska and Cape Cod. I was one of those weird sidearm pitchers that hitters have no clue what to do with, but it was a lot of fun. Thanks for including that. I hang up the jersey so everyone knows I used to be an athlete. I like to plug that as often as I can.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't know that you were a sidearmer. I threw sidearm in high school actually as well. So I would switch arm slots. I was bad. I didn't play in college, so I definitely wasn't as good of a sidearmer as you are, I think. But yeah, there's a guy I've talked with at Driveline Baseball, a company that I work with, who was there for a while, who was like reaching down, even past his pro career being over and all that, playing some semi-pro ball, like going like 91, 92 sidearm, which that's pretty.
Ooh,
no, neither was I. That's pretty wild, right? Like he basically was hurt his arm and then kind of had to drop down, and suddenly was just pumping 91, 92. Anyway, Crazy. So let's talk about your tweet. So here's the headline of the tweet in so many words, right? An unsponsored list, which I appreciated, by the way. Unsponsored. There's just nothing worse than the garbage, especially sometimes long tweets, than the garbage things. Even when I work with my sponsors, like this episode, I was a sponsor and everything. The one thing I will not include in my sponsorship package is sponsored tweets, because it's just the worst content in the world. An unsponsored list of the 10 reasons we've been able to grow our contribution margin by big percentages this year. So actually, before we get into anything specifically, one of the things that jumps out right away is the emphasis there on contribution margin. So can you talk about that? And in fact, I mean, we should just go into number one here. The only thing we care about is contribution margin. That's the number one reason. We're not making big decisions based on MER, Facebook ROAS, CAC, or any other metric. The goal is to add money to the bottom line, and none of those metrics have a 100% correlation with bottom line growth. So start there. I mean, that alone, I actually just recorded an episode all about the power of focus in a business. And in e-commerce business, I think you should be applying that mentality about focus to the issue of contribution margin. You know, in my business, service business, it's a little different than that. So much happens when you start to focus on contribution margin. So like, how did you arrive at that? Have you always been that way? Have you been, when you're at Dugout Mugs, were you thinking that way? Or is this like a more recent thing? And sort of how have you maintained focus on that?
Yeah, so it was kind of a change of mentality in 2022, last year. We, like many e-com businesses, had kind of handcuffed ourselves to our MER, or our cost of sale, and said, you know, if MER is at, 35% or below, we can keep on scaling. If it's not, we have to cut back. And then we got to actually October of last year, where our MER looked fantastic, and we lost money that month. And we were like, well, how the hell does that happen? And we realized we weren't accounting for any of our fixed costs or any of our overhead or COGS or really anything in that MER calculation. So we define our contribution margin as revenue minus COGS minus ad spend minus marketing department overhead. So my team, agencies I pay, my employees, content creation fees, anything that like my marketing department spends money on goes into that. So the only things really not included is kind of like my salary and like our executive team's salaries.
And it shouldn't be, for the record. Like that's not contribution margin, right? So like it's okay. You put that in a different bucket and analyze that separately.
Yeah. So going into this year, we, looked at all the numbers and realized there's probably, 4 or 5 months last year where performance was great. We were getting as much out of our ads as we could have possibly asked them to. But the bottom line for those months didn't look great because we weren't pushing enough volume to make up for all these other costs. So we went into 2023 with the focus of like, we've got a contribution margin for the year. We also map it out by month. We say the only thing we care about is hitting that goal. So if the goal is 100K for the month, it doesn't matter if we have to do 200K in revenue or 600K in revenue. That's the amount of money we want to be adding to the bottom line.
Yeah, that's so good. I was just working with a client actually who had a really big spike in spend for a few days. And so volume went way up, and efficiency as a sort of rounded up combined metric, efficiency went down significantly, right? So MER, like, which I think probably most people listening to this know that metric, but it's just total revenue over total ad spend is what that is. Marketing efficiency ratio is what MER is. And so, yeah, expressed either as a percentage, where like you just did, 35% would be the spend against the total revenue, 35% spend, or sometimes expressed as like in the same way as a ROAS would be or something, right? So in that 35% example would be right around a 3-to-1, slightly less. In any case, this brand's MER went way down, and we were looking at it, and it was just, going through and showing him this exact same thing, which at first, he had the same thing. He'd been used to kind of running off of MER, and that's, normal and whatever. So I was showing him like, hey, it's okay. Like it's actually a good thing that your MER went down. It means that we were able to spend at an efficiency where we were adding positive contribution dollars at that spend. So we like, even though your like combined efficiency looks quite a bit worse than it did before, our contribution margin went up. Our contribution dollars went up, and it went up pretty significantly. And what's more, we know from the customers that we acquired today that a lot of them, because we acquired so many customers, that they're going to come back over more time. And if you've ever looked at this carefully with your contribution dollars, what you know is that because ad spend is part of the contribution margin calculation, that customer who comes back is way more contribution margin positive than that customer on that first purchase, right? Because you don't have to pay for them the second time. And so that ad spend cost that's going into that calculation goes away. And so so acquiring all those customers really, really matters if you have, and this brand's not a super high LTV brand or anything like that, but it's enough to where it will matter. And so it goes from there. So yeah, that's interesting you say, by the way, that you're not making big decisions based on these metrics. If contribution margin is what you are tracking, but you're not making decisions based on Facebook ROAS, CAC, or MER, or any other metric, this gets into like the attribution conversation a little bit, but does that like, how are you actually making decisions then? In the sense of like, are you thinking about optimizations? Are you looking at in-platform metrics at all, like to make those decisions? How do you make the decision based on contribution and not ROAS practically?
Sure. So when I say we don't make big decisions based on any of that, I mean like we are not increasing or decreasing our total budget. We're not changing the goals for, any particular month. The minor decisions we make are often based on either triple whale or in-platform metrics. Because like obviously, click-through rate, cost per outbound click on ads, like that stuff matters. With us being a little bit higher AOV, our AOV's $325 this year, I don't trust attribution as much as I did, working at a brand where the AOV's 50. I think we're a much more considered purchase, so I'm not a big believer in Facebook ROAS. I like ads that will spend money, will get me quality traffic at a good price. And when I scale those ads, if contribution margin goes up, to me, that means it was a good decision. The only other thing where we're doing is we have a spreadsheet where we're tracking advertising dollars versus revenue by SKU and by collection within our store. And that's been really interesting to look at this year because we'll advertise our whiskey barrel watch collection. And if we spend 10 grand on a week and from that collection get 40 grand in revenue, that's great. That's a win. But that number typically does not correlate with what Facebook or Triple Whale says the ROAS of that campaign is. So we've kind of taken a more holistic view of our marketing performance this year and really just mainly focused on money out versus money in.
Okay, I want to linger on that, but we got 10 points here to get to. So I don't even know actually if we'll get to all of them. Maybe we'll leave some for the people to go discover afterwards. But number 2, we work in a stable ecosystem. We make changes to our FB ads once a week. We make changes to our FB ads once a week. There are so many people who are listening to this just at that sentence, just like, what? Like, what? That's wild. Nate says, we're not tweaking stuff daily. We're not reactionary. We don't panic when we have 3 days of poor performance. We just wake up every day, do the work that we know will improve performance down the line, and don't worry about daily volatility. Having a steady hand on the wheel is incredibly valuable in e-com, not just for your bottom line, but also for everyone's mental health and morale. There is so much to say about this. Let me just hand the mic back to you and have you talk about it. Tell me more about not making changes to your Facebook account.
It's a scary proposition, but we have reaped the rewards of it this year. And I think it's 2 parts to it. One, I truly believe Facebook works better when you leave it alone and do the thing you told it to do. We got to a point last year where we were like, seems like every time we touch something, performance sucks for 2 days. Like, maybe we shouldn't touch things for a while. So that's half of that. The other half is like what it does to team morale, I think is such an understated thing in e-com. Like, I know at times when I've worked and lived in a stressful environment when my boss texts me at 10 a.m. because sales yesterday were down 9%. That is not a fun nor productive environment to work in. So I read this number 2 to myself once a week just to remind myself how and why we're doing it. But yeah, it's been so important for us. One, I don't think you're going to make better decisions looking at something every 24 hours than you're going to, a week. You're going to have more reliable data the longer you let something sit. But 2, it's just let us focus on all the other work that we know can improve performance. Because in 2023, I don't think anyone's finding any hacks or anything big in their Facebook ad account that's going to double your business. We know a lot of what's given us success has been outside of the account, so that's what we're focused on. and we're letting Facebook just be the megaphone that
So
it is.
good. I think this is something that's very hard for people to really internalize. First of all, there's like just the reality of the human action towards, or human bias towards action, right? Like people have that as a baseline thing. Like you just have a bias towards making a decision, and when in fact not making a decision is often the better decision. And so you have to fight the bias first of all. Secondly, your point about like mental health and morale is really true. I've been around the Facebook ads game for 8 or 9 years. How long have you been total? So you just know the sort of live and die daily adjustment kind of thing that happens. And I've been having a little bit of debate with Taylor Holiday gently recently about whether or not it's better to behave off of daily tracking for these kinds of metrics or weekly tracking. I prefer weekly tracking in part because I don't want people to react every day. And Taylor is seeing a different set of things than I am, and I want to be slow to make it sound a certain way or whatever. Like I think there's a logic to what he's saying too, which is that like in his point, like if you get a day or two behind on a spend plan and a revenue plan, it can actually be really, really hard to make it up. And so sort of being really on that each day can matter. But I really, really like what you're saying here. And I think that the baseline idea actually that Meta is really good at optimizing and you should get out of the way is like one of the core truths to internalize about running Meta ads, that if you make too many changes or if you do stuff to get in the way of it and make little tweaks based on these things, you will interpret data wrong all the time. You will just get in the way and mess it up. I think this is a fascinating point. Was this hard for you to make a switch to doing that?
It was hard for my bosses to make a switch to it. I have firmly believed that this is the right way for a while. But that said, it's hard to wake up on a Thursday and it's been a bad week all week and your head of marketing is telling you the right thing to do is nothing. So we went back and forth on it. We've broken this rule a handful of times, but I know every day when I wake up, my job is already to work on the things that are going to increase performance in the future. I don't need to panic and try to get revenue numbers up today. I think that leads to a lot of bad habits. I'd send out more emails and texts and flash sales and stuff that's not actually going to help grow the brand in the future. It's just going to make us feel a little bit better today. So just kind of zooming out, focusing on long-term growth.
Yeah, that's the other reason I don't like sometimes some of the in daily kind of adjustment thinking is that it just necessarily leads to short-termism. Like if you take larger swings in longer time intervals, you're more likely to make bigger impacts with those larger swings, and you're less likely to do the little short-term things that are potentially going to hurt you. So yeah. Okay, number 3, we set aggressive goals and spend at a level we want to hit. We don't believe in waiting for performance to get better to scale. Want your business to grow? Spend more money on ads. It's that simple. There's an obvious problem with this, Nate, which is that what if your ads are not producing to the level that you want them to?
The math tells you that if, your blended return on ad spend isn't as good as you want, you should spend more money. I think you actually posted an example a couple of weeks ago of, if you're spending $100K on ads at a 3x return, then that return dips to 2.7. The right answer to add more money to your bottom line is spend more money. It's kind of counterintuitive, but the way the math works out is volume solves a lot of issues. And I don't believe that we as marketers should let Facebook or, Murr or whatever dictate how we grow our business. I think we should be able, I think our job is to make current performance work for us, especially when our business is so reliant on Facebook ads. There's a lot of things that are out of our control. So let's focus on controlling the things we can control. And what we can control is our budget. And if ad performance isn't as great as we want, we should probably increase volume. We should probably see if we can get COGS cheaper. We should probably try to increase our AOV or LTV. We should try to bundle. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but I don't believe cutting budget because Facebook tells you its ROAS isn't great. Is the right solution to grow your business.
So you're saying that is just because actually your performance is better than the in-platform metric, at least a little bit better, and you could take the volume with a thinner contribution margin and still win, basically? Is that am I walking back the math you just said, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really good. This again kind of gets into a little bit of an attribution game, but this is part of the reason why, personally, I don't use an attribution tool at all of any kind, except for the Meta Ads dashboard. which I mostly use as a pulse check. And I think like what you're saying, which is measure contribution margin, will actually lead you to a different kind of approach than sort of any dashboard or anything like that will. If you're actually measuring the contribution dollars, and if it's actually producing those, it's working. That's the answer. And that's that simple.
Yep. We have every single day for the year forecasted revenue, ad spend, and contribution margin. And we just look at it daily and we look at it weekly. And at the end of the week, if the number's not what we're supposed to be hitting, we can make a change. But we're not going to cut budget just because MER isn't where we want it.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. Number 4, we've cut our marketing department's fixed costs in half from a year ago. As the head of this department, I want the highest percentage possible of total marketing spend to be going to ads. So we've cut some awesome agencies and freelancers that were doing amazing work because we found more efficient ways to get that work done. In our case, a couple in-house team members along with me that wear a lot of hats, aka we're built different. Talk about that.
Yeah, part of, coming into a marketing department that needed some optimizations was cutting some teammates that were doing great jobs. But, as we looked at some of those months where, our MER was great, our ads were producing, over a 3 or 3.5 MER, but money's not getting added to our bottom line because we're paying a lot of agencies and freelancers that at the end of the day were kind of nice to haves. They were kind of luxuries that we couldn't afford anymore. So me and a couple team members came on. We're far less specialized than some of our previous partners were, a more jack of all trades. But yeah, we've been able to cut fixed costs a ton, which lets us spend more money on ads, which ultimately adds money to the bottom line. So it's been good. It's been hard. It's been stressful to run a lean and mean team. But like I said, at the end of the day, I want as many dollars as possible going to ads as we can afford.
The way that I have typically talked about this, and I think this is part of the deal here, is that in e-commerce, being able to run a low OpEx as a percentage of your total revenue is one of the built-in advantages of the business model. That like e-commerce scales really well against a pretty small team, and being pretty dogged about keeping a small team and really resisting those nice to haves, like as you call them, right, is so crucial. And I think part of the reason that you're able to do that probably is because of the way you're tracking the outcomes, right? If you're looking at the contribution margin and then, measuring that against sort of measuring that down to bottom line profitability and then seeing kind of where the problem shows up between those things, you're going to suddenly see like, holy cow, we're having a really hard time getting out from under this OpEx number, even though these people are doing a good job and they're hardworking and all those things. And so I'm just like, I'm a huge believer that brands need to stay exceptionally disciplined about adding team members to their business, because very often the case that the cost is in excess of the value for a brand in doing that, even if the people are doing a pretty good job, because there just are so many ways to stay efficient in e-commerce in particular. So yeah, do you guys outsource talent at all? Like, are you guys working with a distributed team?
Nope. Everyone is in-house as of a couple months ago. A year and a half ago, we had several agencies and freelancers on board, but have taken everything back in-house. It's been a lot more efficient.
Like, is your team all in the US?
We do have a overseas, yeah.
You have heard me talk about more staffing, and I'm going to tell you again that if you're hiring, I don't know why you wouldn't consider using them to do it. Filipino employees in e-commerce come across to your business in the US, remotely of course, with incredible experience, incredible talent, and incredible work ethic as well. And More Staffing can help you locate those people, all for a much lower cost than hiring those same folks in the US, but a great price for them, which means you attract great talent in the Philippines to your business because you're paying a good local wage there, even though, again, it is helpful for you. If you're trying to grow a lean e-commerce business at the same time, add great talent, it is a great way to go do that. They will help you with all of it. They have an awesome offer where if they help you find an employee that gets added to your team from the Philippines and it does not work out for at least a year, they will replace that employee for free. So there's really no risk to you to doing it. And so you should go and consider working with More Staffing right now by going to morenow.co. I am personally working with them and using them to staff up aspects of my business. They've been incredibly helpful to me. And so they will be helpful to you as well. Morenow.co. Go work with More Staffing today. If you're looking to add talent in any part of your e-commerce business, they will find you incredible talent at a great price. They will do it well. Go check it out, morenow.co. Let's talk about number 5. We raised our prices. we're bundling more, and we're discounting less than we ever have. AOV and LTV is sky high compared to a year ago. We're now acquiring much more valuable customers than we ever have been. Raise your price. There's an old quote from I think it's Mark Andreessen. There was, I'm going to butcher this, but you're going to get the idea. That there's some old story that somebody was interviewing Mark Andreessen and saying, if you could put one thing on a billboard that was going to attract the attention of everybody, I think at the time it was in Silicon Valley, about what you can do to make your business better, what would it be? And he said he would put, raise your price. That would be like the thing he'd put on a billboard to tell everybody what to do. People are terrified to raise their price. They all fear a mass customer revolt and all these kinds of things. Talk about how you guys thought through this and how you arrived at the conclusion that you did.
Yeah, well, everyone in marketing loves to complain about rising CACs, but no one ever talks about, well, if CACs are rising, just increase your AOV. Seems like a simple enough solution to me. And we've executed well this year. Part of it is just looking at the state of America right now. I think the inflation number is a lot worse than they're telling us it is. And I'm looking at my grocery bill and my Netflix bill and my gas bill. And I'm like, damn, everything is getting more expensive except for watches. Why aren't watches getting more expensive? So, I gave a whole talk at Triple Whale's event about number 5 here. But, when someone was considering a $400 watch a year ago, that was 2 weeks worth of groceries that they're considering paying for this watch. Now it's only 8 days of groceries that they're considering to buy this watch. So, I think prices are raising everywhere. So I wouldn't be afraid. And the question I posed to everyone at the conference was, is anyone here competing purely on price? Is anyone's only competitive advantage that you are the cheapest product out there? And for most of us in e-com, the answer is no. So if we're not trying to compete on price, then why are we trying to compete on price? Why wouldn't we try to move up market? Why wouldn't we try to have a premium product? So we're now actually going into product development meetings with the goal of an AOV, of saying, hey, I want a $1,000 watch. Go make the best watch you guys can. And they're coming up with all sorts of stuff that's going to be awesome for next year. But yeah, it's been really big for us. And then on the discount side, we were discount addicted, like a lot of e-com brands are. Every other week was like 30% off here, $100 off here. We've cut back with how aggressive we are discounting this year, and we're offering more bundles instead. So to get the best deal from us, you still have to spend a higher than average AOV. And all that combined means we're acquiring more valuable customers who are going to probably buy again without a discount needed and are going to stick around for a longer time. So all of that has really added to the bottom line this year.
The reason those customers are more valuable is because they're more willing to spend more money up front, which just sort of indicates that they are a more valuable customer long term.
Up for front and over time. So we're starting to get, LTV
and you're seeing that
data
come through.
From customers we acquired.
Got it.
Yep.
I mean, do you think it's because the kind of customer who is more willing to spend more dollars on day one is also the kind of customer who's more willing to spend more dollars long term?
Yeah, I think it's that simple. I think it's probably the customer's a little wealthier, has a little more cash on them. If they're not hunting out a 30 or 40% off deal, that means they're probably comfortable spending whatever we're asking. So we've seen a lot better LTV data from these new cohorts as well.
Yeah, makes tons of sense. It's so interesting, man. They tend to think of the price of their products and their businesses as something that was handed down from on high. And it becomes a genetic element of the brand. You cannot change the price. If you do, people will freak out, blah, blah, blah. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. You actually can raise your price. You can even actually use the moment of raising your price to garner goodwill by basically telling everybody, hey, we're going to raise our price in a week. Go buy it right now. And it functions like a discount without discounting. It actually functions as a discount while signaling value in the company because you're signaling that your price is going to go up. So you can use that for a nice moment. There's a great moment at e-commerce fuel at ECF Live this year where there was a keynote speaker who was a pricing expert, and she was more around like services. That was the main area of expertise that she had, but she was talking about people raising price in general and just how margin positive it is to raise your price. I mean, if you think about it, you add to your price, that money goes straight to the bottom line. There is no associated increase in cost with that, right? Your shipping cost to send it to the customer stayed the same. Your COGS stayed the same. You just raised the price. All you did was added margin. And so if you can do it, it can really work. Now, like, of course, there are times when it doesn't actually work out as well as you would hope it would. It was, although it doesn't usually result in fact, I've never heard of it resulting in a revolt. And somebody asked this woman this question at some point during the Q&A and said, "Hey, can you give me your pricing horror stories?" Because she's up there telling everybody, raise your price, raise your price, raise your price. And somebody said, "Hey, can you give us your pricing horror stories?" Like a time somebody raised the price and it just went like terribly and created all kinds of problems. And she goes, "No, I don't have one. I've been in this game for a while. I don't know of a single example of a time when actually people freaked out." And so, yeah.
Well, then, like, if it happens for the first time in history, change it back.
That's right. It's not that hard. Yeah.
Who cares? Like, nothing lost. Like, you learned that you are at the top of what your price should be, but I would bet anyone listening could raise their prices by 10 to 20% and they wouldn't hear a word from their customers.
Okay, number 6, we've launched a lot of awesome new products. This seems to not get talked about much on ecom Twitter, and I don't know why. I'd take a banger product strategy over the best marketing strategy any day of the week. Nate, this is 100% correct. This issue is totally true. The reality is, especially in a business like Original Grain, where it is sort of there's no consumable element of that. Product release strategies is going to be the lifeblood of how you maintain growth in the business and profitability in the business, because you're never going to generate LTV on one watch, right? If I buy a watch from you, I really don't need to buy a second watch from you. Most likely, maybe some small subset of people are going to be super fans who do, but on the whole, it's not going to be the case. Instead, it's going to be so much about like regular product releases and getting things continuing to move that way. That is the only way for a business like yours to grow, and to grow specifically with returning customers. And it opens up your ability to reach new customers with new products that new people will like. So yeah, talk more about how you guys did this. Is this like a new thing for Original Grain? Have you guys sort of added additional efforts to this? Talk through it.
Yeah, so we've increased the velocity of how often we're launching products quite a bit. Usually they were doing 3 or 4 big launches a year. This year we've pretty much had a big one every month, and next year we're looking to add to that as well. But yeah, as much as I would love to take credit for all of our success as the marketing guy, I know that it's not my job to sell people watches they don't want. It's my job to sell people watches that they want to buy, and I can't do that unless our team is creating dope watches. So it's been really great to see the guys get back in their product development bags and start turning out some awesome stuff, because it matters so much. And to your point there has kind of been like 2 strategies we've taken with everything, where like we launched a collaboration with Buffalo Trace Bourbon last year, where our best-selling collection was already made out of whiskey barrels. So we're like, all right, let's just attach a premium distillery's name to it and let it rip. We saw that crush for our base. So returning customer revenue is way up for that, because we know that people like that already. And then also running ads with their logo on it has helped us tremendously. On the other hand, this May, we launched a collection with Toyota Racing Development, where we used the racing grade aluminum from their new solar octane line of trucks to craft into watches. And this was a completely new demo for us. And this was really kind of a gamble on like, well, let's see if we can make something work for this audience. It crushed super hard. So now we're like, all right, how do we make more stuff that truck guys are going to love? So we've liked to kind of use it in both ways. But yeah, I've told the guys like, hey, there's no such thing as too much product for me, because I know the more we launch, the more at bats we're giving ourselves to find some new best-selling
Yeah, people
watches.
misunderstand this too, like because every launch obviously does create this LTV opportunity. Somebody's going to be really stoked on that who's bought something before. But those 2 examples are a perfect example, which is also now like when you go to run ads against those 2 products, right? Like those are going to reach different people, and so it functionally expands your ability to reach the maximum number of potential customers, and therefore not only generate the LTV off of the returning customers on the launch, but also generate a bunch of new customer revenue based off of the fact that now you can speak to another person in a new way that it's going to really deeply resonate with them. And so they both really, really matter with new product releases.
Yep, 100%.
All right, number 7, this is going to be a really good one. So here it is, the entire one. I've got that dog in me. I mean, I bet this is kind of a joke, but I bet it's kind of real.
Yeah, so it's a joke. I'm pretty dumb, but the real message behind it is, if you're an ecom brand that I think's doing sub 40 million a year, and your head of marketing isn't in the weeds, I think that's kind of a problem. I think you should be in Facebook, be in Klaviyo, be in PostScript, whatever your tools are. I think you need to be really close to the work that's getting done. That's something I've been, I don't want to say forced into, but it's a necessary part of my job running a lean
Right.
and mean
It
team is that I'm
ties really
super
directly.
close,
It ties
close
really
to
directly into
everything.
that OpEx thing that we were talking about earlier, right? Is that like, yeah, if you are shaving those team members off, then the implication of that is that you are actually in the execution of the work.
Yeah. So as much as I love managing and understand the power and scale of that, being really close to what we do has been great for us. So if you're out there and you think you're too good to get in Canva and make some ads or get in Klaviyo and send a plain text email, I would highly encourage you to do that because I think you're going to learn a lot more about your marketing efforts by actually getting your hands on it.
Yeah, it's really good, man. It's really good. All right, number 8. We don't suffer from shiny object syndrome. We're not chasing new trendy tactics and softwares. We have a 4-page strategy doc that I created last December. I've only added 2 tools to it since then, retention.com and IntelliGems, A/B testing. When we evaluate a new tool tactic teammate, we ask ourselves, will this increase AOV, increase LTV, increase customer acquisition velocity, decrease CAC, grow the brand, make our workflow more efficient? We need to be able to say hell yes to at least one of those questions to add something to our strategy. That is so good. And there are so many people who, or this is one of the great problems, I think, especially when brands are struggling, they just go start chasing stuff and want to add stuff and do, whatever. And focus is so hard. People are selling them stuff all the time. People are listening to podcasts like this one and they hear about something they have to try. And so like, oh, Andrew said to do that, or, whatever, pick your person of choice. It's not just necessarily me, or they're on Twitter and they see somebody say, you got to do that, whatever. And so it just becomes really hard to resist the constant lure of the things you could be missing out on here. How are you guys managing to do that? You reference this 4-page strategy doc. Maybe that's the key, is that you've sort of written down what will work and what won't. But how are you actually managing to resist shiny object syndrome? Everybody wants to resist it, but how are you actually doing it?
So we intentionally pick our heads up every quarter and look around and talk to some folks in the industry, see what's new, see what other tactics and tools people have added. But that's a very conscious decision and usually only lasts a week or two of like, we're looking for what else is out there. We did it at the end of Q1 and decided nothing was worth bringing on. We did it at the end of Q2 to decided that these 2 tools were, but it's just a very conscious flip of a switch that's like, hey, we're going to pick our heads up, evaluate what's happening in the industry. And then for 12 weeks, we're going to put our heads back down. We're going to do the boring, consistent, chipping away at it kind of work that we actually believe will increase performance, and just make sure we're really not paying attention to much. It's the reason why I really don't listen to too many marketing podcasts besides the Andrew Ferris show.
Okay,
it's great.
To say that.
It's the reason I don't, read a lot of newsletters out there. I'm confident that the strategy we've created will double our business a couple more times before we need to add anything major to it. And because we feel confident in that and because we've seen it work already, it's been easy to say no a lot more often than we're saying yes to new tech.
Yeah. I'm actually with you. I listen to Taylor Holiday and the E-commerce Playbook podcast sometimes. I've told Taylor I don't listen to every episode. And it's partly for the same reason. It's that I actually am at a point where I sometimes don't want more input. And I think it's a career stage thing and all that. But the willingness to purposefully say no to stuff. And I actually saw Jess Bachman, who I had on my show recently, say something about this too, which is that like, another thing he does is actively and purposefully pursues knowledge from other disciplines, right? So like he's purposefully trying to go read non-business books and sort of just get other kinds of inputs in his life to sort of open his creative mental space a little bit more, as opposed to just another business thing all the time. And again, I think there's sort of phases here and personality types. And I've known other guys who I think are really great operators and gals who I think are good operators who are just devouring business books all the time, So there's probably some personality thing here as well. But yeah, I like this point very, very much because, again, there is just this element of, if you start to sort of boil down all these 8 things that you're saying here so far that we've gotten to, right? What we've said is focus doggedly on contribution margin, run a lean OpEx, get into the work as you need to and work hard at it, spend because your advertising works and creates value there. Don't make too many changes. It's a lot of different ways of saying, if we try to be really focused on generating contribution margin in our business, That means that we say no to a bunch of things, we say yes to a few things, and we say yes to do them as well as possible. We don't overreact. We just really work on having a great job with product, putting that product in front of people, and then tracking contribution margin relentlessly. And there's a lot of potential stuff to get in the way of that. And what you're saying is exactly right. For brands in a certain stage of business, that's the whole game. That's the whole game. You have to just really do that. Okay, 2 more. I'm actually amazed that we were getting through all of these right now, but here we are. It's good. Okay, number 9. Facebook ads got cheap again. $8.60 CPM year to date. Go ahead and say, I don't know what your historic CPM is. Obviously, different CPMs are different for every brand and every customer type and all those kinds of things. But this actually speaks to something really important, and so does number 10, which says something about the macro environment in which you're playing, which is really important. So talk more about that.
I'll take a little bit of credit for the decrease in CPMs because we're running way more static ads than we have video in the past. But it's across the board. CPMs on Facebook are cheaper this year. Our Facebook structure is pretty simple. We separate our campaigns by collection. They're all broad and targeted. We touch them once a week, and that's pretty much it. So whether we're leaning heavily on statics or just the current state of Facebook, CPMs are super cheap. That's down like 40 or 50% from last year. So we're reaching almost double the amount of people for every dollar we spend. Can't underestimate how big of an impact that makes on the business.
It's really massive. And this is something people also just don't get about Facebook, which is that actually they're just kind of constantly finding, as Instagram Reels placements open up more, or as you grab stills or whatever, and you keep doing things, it's definitely possible that this gets better over certain times. It's hard to target it too much, but if you can reach more people and you can get in front of them, it can make a really big difference. Let's do one more, and then I want to make a broader reflection about the sort of environment in which you're playing the game. But the final, number 10, and again, I don't know if this is a joke or not, but I bet it's not. Number 10, watches are cool again. Talk about that.
Yeah, so watches along with crypto and NFTs had a big little bubble there on COVID. It's come down slightly from the peak, but it got a lot more people into watches, into watchmaking. And it's people kind of at every range of the market as well. It's not just the Rolexes and Richard Milles and like the super high-end pieces. It's trickled down to us in Movement and, every other brand that sits in that kind of sub $500 range. So it's been good to capitalize on that. We are not big enough where we're like creating demand for the watch industry, but the demand is there and we've been able to capture a bigger chunk of it than a lot of watch brands.
This is the most over or underrated thing about like quote unquote good marketers, good brands, good advertisers, or whatever, is the demand side of the equation. It's just like the environment between people's spending power, between the inflationary environment, between what people are interested in at a time. Like, it's just, there are all of these things. And this is like, gets back to the Facebook CPM thing a little bit too, where it's like, there's a lot of this stuff that's sort of outside of people's control, but it has a huge impact on it. And I actually think it really reflects well on you, Nate, that you put that in there as something you recognize that is a tailwind for you, because every business is going to have tailwinds and every business is going to have headwinds at different times. And so recognizing when it's not just that you're a genius, it's that you're actually getting some really significant tailwinds here. And now the genius move is actually to see it and to try and do everything you can. Like, for example, this one pairs really, really well. This plus CPMs pair really, really well with the thing we talked about earlier, which is like, go spend more. Go spend more money right now while you possibly can. Like, the great regret, I still think about this all the time. In my first brand I worked with was Kalo, the silicone wedding ring company. And Taylor Holiday and I talk all the time about how we didn't spend enough. And we, it was 0 to 20 million in a year and a half with no outside funding. We were spending plenty of money on Facebook that we knew what to do at the time. This is, 8 years ago. So it's a whole different environment. And we just look at it still and go like, why? I mean, we were still getting 3 to 1 or whatever on our ads, something we couldn't imagine now. We should have been spending because it just like was so silly of us not to do it. And when you have tailwinds like that, man, you just got to take advantage of them, The other example I think of here for anybody else who's a baseball fan like Nate and I is like, look, part of the reason people might hit a lot of home runs is because they play in a park where you hit a lot of home runs. And that's part of the reality of it, right? If you're playing in Colorado, then you're more likely to hit home runs than in other places. And it's because of the reality of the ball and the environment and all those kinds of things. So go take advantage of it when you can.
Yeah, I like to say that everything that's going well is because I'm very good at my job. Everything that's going poorly is because of macroeconomic headwinds that I can't control. But the truth is, a lot of those tailwinds do help, and I think it's up to us as marketers to make sure we're giving the ball to the guy with the hot hand. And I look at for whatever reason, the current state of the world, advertising for original grain is going well right now. So let's put all we can in that bucket, knowing that, we don't know what tomorrow will hold. We don't know what 2024 is going to hold. So we're doing everything we can to go get it while it's hot. Because I too have regrets of being like, man, why didn't I place bigger POs in 2018? Why didn't we spend more on ads? All that stuff haunts us a little bit, I think. So I definitely don't want to be making that.
When you make that
again.
mistake, though, it does probably help you to internalize not doing it again. It may help. It may make you overreact at some point. Maybe your next PO gets too big or something. But yeah, you had a little summary statement at the end here. Remember this list next time someone tells you a new software or ad hack grew their biz by 40%. Real growth happens in the trenches. And by the trenches, I mean my air-conditioned office 30 feet away from my bed. So glad to see that you're in the arena, Nate. You're in the arena.
Dude, this was before the in the arena tweet, but it's so funny to me when people are like, oh, I'm grinding. And I'm like, I'm typing on a keyboard and my monitor has a blue light filter on it. So it's not too harsh on my eyes. Like, we're not grinding, guys. Okay. Like, let's chill out. We're all way softer than any of us want us to admit. I've got my bare feet on the carpet right now and I'm chilling. So let's not pretend we're grinding. We don't grind. We look at a computer.
There are people in the world with actually hard jobs,
Yeah. All of my friends work harder than me.
But the front half of that part is smart, which is that, again, part of the point of the list is to help people resist the shiny object syndrome thing. It's again, if we were to summarize this list, it's focus doggedly on product and on contribution margin and spend money on ads. That's really what you said here. That's what this whole podcast was. And resist the temptation to go chase down all those other things. That's the whole game, so.
Yeah, I think I've summed it up, my whole e-com strategy. I think it's 9 words. Spend as much money on ads as you can afford. 10 words. And that takes into effect, don't spend money on OpEx, don't spend money on shiny objects, try to increase AOV and LTV so you can spend more money in ads. I really think that's the punchline here, and it's really easy to overcomplicate it in e-com, but simplifying it has produced great results for us.
So good. I think a lot about the journey to from 2 million to 20 million. That's the kind of revenue space that I tend to sit in a lot with clients, and certainly dealing with other brands, bigger ones, smaller ones as well. But that's the part of the journey I tend to think the most about. And I think that this tweet is about as good of a job as you could do summarizing sort of what it takes to actually make that. And I know, you guys have done really, really well. I don't know exactly how big you all are, but you guys have done very well as far as that journey goes and can express with a lot of confidence and knowledge what it takes to get to the top end of that journey. So, yeah. All right, Nate. Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. This is the first podcast episode I've ever done like this, just walking through a tweet, but I think it was so good. That means you should definitely go follow Nate on Twitter at Nate Lagos. And that link, of course, is in the show notes, but it's Nate, Lagos. Go do that right now. Reach out to him, hit him up, tell him how smart he is on the internet so that he knows that all of that absolute grinding hard work is paying off with Twitter followers. Yeah. Anything else to tell people? Anything else to promote? Anything like that?
No, that's pretty much it. Buy a watch at originalgrain.com if you're in the market for one. Follow me. I try to post relevant stuff in between my rants about Major League Baseball and conspiracy theories surrounding the alleged moon landings. So in between that, there's some good marketing nuggets in there. But yeah, other than that, that's it. That's me.
All right. Thanks so much for listening as always, and we will see you next time. All right, big thanks to Nate for joining me on this episode of the show, and big thanks, of course, to More Staffing, my sponsor. As always, virtual assistants can be helpful. Virtual professionals can change your business. Go work with More Staffing by going to morenow.co right now. Hey, I have a couple interviews coming up that I want to tell you about, and they are the reason you should subscribe. I have some solo episodes coming too, but a few interviews I'm really pumped about. One of them with Dan McCormick from Create, the creatine gummy brand in its earliest stages. He's been building in public in a really public way, in a really cool way. So we're going to talk about what's going on with his business. Ju Ryu from Hero Cosmetics, talking about life after the exit, talking about her exit, all those things. Massive monster brand with a huge exit, 9-figure exit for her. And so going to talk with her as well about some of those things. If you enjoyed my episode with Patrick Cadu, you will like this one as well. And most importantly, probably, I've got another Opening the Books episode coming. It is recorded. I am now getting it into production to get it ready to go. It takes some work to do these episodes, so I'm working on that now. But it is with a brand that you have seen and heard of, and we dive deep on their Meta Ads account and talk about restructuring, rebuilding the whole thing towards bid cap. So I'm going to tell you you'll see exactly how I would suggest you do that by watching that episode. So if you liked my Opening the Books episode with Nazrin Jafari from Mixed by Nazrin, you will love this episode as well. And if you're really looking to dive deep on Meta Ads, it's going to be really good. So great stuff there. So make sure you subscribe. That's the point. Make sure you subscribe. And of course, rate, review. That's really helpful. And the most helpful thing you can do is share this episode with a friend who would get value out of it as well. If it was useful to you, please share it along to somebody else. That is a big way to say thanks. If you'd like to contact me, I'm always happy to hear from you, answer your questions, those sorts of things. Reach out to me at podcasts@ajfgrowth.com. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris as well, and we can connect there. I think that's it. I think that's all the things I'm supposed to say. You know what to do. You've listened to podcasts before and watched YouTube videos before. So do all those things that are helpful for me and for growing my show. That's really what I'm after. Well, I help you as much as I possibly can. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, I'll see you next time.